At this time, I'd like to introduce Gina Gilbert. Gina's an effective recruiter and has volunteered many times for Crossroads, and she's about to tell us her story about why her Crossroads career and why she volunteers. So Gina, take it away.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. As Tom said, my name is Gina Gilbert. I am currently a talent acquisition manager for a company called 𝙅𝙤𝙝𝙆. 𝙅𝙤𝙆 is a dental support organization, and that basically means we support over 650 dental practices across 30 states. And I have been in my role about a little over 3.5 years. And I'm also, as Tom mentioned, a volunteer for Crossroads, and I absolutely love it. So I'm here with you tonight to share my job transition story. And my story began in the fall of 2016. And prior to 2016, I really didn't have any problem finding the next job. It didn't matter if I simply wanted the next job or I was relocating to a new area. I just didn't have that much trouble finding the next job. But this time was different in 2016. My early career was actually in sales, and then sales training and product training, mostly in the advertising industry with newspapers as they were transitioning from print to digital. But I was always in the advertising department and not in HR like you would think. And I'll bring that point home a little bit later in my story. But about 18 months into my career, my time with the St. Paul Pioneer Press here in the Twin Cities, they asked me to start recruiting advertising positions, even though I had been training. So I was recruiting and training, but I had never recruited before. So I basically had to teach myself how to recruit. But that is when my talent acquisition career began. And working in the newspaper industry was very interesting at the time. They were and still are fighting for their existence, transitioning from print to digital. And digital advertising is actually quite a bit less expensive than print advertising. And so despite the fact that they were having some success in transitioning to more digital, revenue was still declining. And so over the 10 years I was there, I definitely watched them downsize and go through many layoffs. And when my turn came in 2016, I really wasn't surprised that I was laid off, but I was surprised the day it happened. And it actually happened just a month after my 10-year anniversary with them. And like many, I was devastated at first. My job was a huge part of my identity. My coworkers had become close friends and we weathered many storms together. And I had been working for over 20 years by that time, and I had never really stopped to think about, was I really doing what I wanted to do? And more importantly, was I doing what God designed me to do? And I guess he decided to take that time and give me an opportunity to stop and examine that. And so my first week of job transition, I really didn't know what to do with myself, in all honesty. I had always been so busy being a full-time working mom with my husband and my 2 active daughters. And now I had a bunch of time on my hands, excuse me. And so I needed help, I needed guidance. And I attend Grace Church, and I had heard about the job transition ministry. And so I started going to the Thursday morning networking meetings. They were at Thursday mornings at that time, live. And I joined a small group, as Tom was describing, but I also did the same with the Wooddale job transition group. And despite my background in sales and sales training, I had never actually had to sell myself. And so I had to really put a lot of effort into learning to network. I knew that I needed to do it. I knew that I needed to treat job search like it was a full-time job, but also that I needed to let God be the one that opened the doors for me. And as a Christian, I love that Crossroads is a faith-based organization, but I also love how practical it is. It gives you real, useful, tangible things to apply to your job search. And while there are many great things that we talk about, and Tom listed many of them, what I found most useful for myself was the emphasis on networking. And if you haven't read it already, in addition to all the great curriculum that is in the Crossroads, I also highly recommend the 20-minute networking meeting by Nathan Perez and Marcia Bollinger. It's an excellent book, and it's a quick read. But despite my background and the tools I was learning, I was still really, really nervous about networking. And so I started with a few friends who let me practice on them. And then I started to reach out to former colleagues and friends and was soon networking very regularly. I also decided that I would meet anyone and everyone who was willing to meet with me and let God open and close the doors along the way. So about 4 months into my job transition, I had met with a former coworker who introduced me to another person who introduced me to another person. And that led to my first actually contract job. And I had never considered contract work before this, but I ended up doing a few contracts. But during my job transition, I had decided to expand my HR knowledge and study for my 𝙤𝙤𝙗 exam. And I had been mentioning this to the person that I was talking to, and they owned a small consulting firm. And they basically said that they had some projects, HR related projects that were piling up. And next thing I knew, they hired me for a 12-week contract as an HR coordinator. And this was helpful for two reasons. First, it did help me study for my test, but secondly, it helped me have an actual HR position on my resume, which was something that I was striving towards. After I finished my first contract, I did take a little time and study for my test, and then I completed my test and I achieved my goal of having my 𝙤𝙤𝙗 certification. And then I started networking yet again and was soon contacted actually by a friend of Harry's who reached out because he had a recruiting contract for a small manufacturing company, and they needed somebody like yesterday. So, I mean, this was super quick. I heard about it on Tuesday and I started on Friday. So it was very, very quick. But this time during this contract, I realized that I needed to learn how to network while I was working full-time because it was a contract. And so I needed to be looking for the next one. So that was a good lesson as well, as how to keep up your networking when you're working full-time. And then after my second contract ended, I was actually making some progress with a permanent job, which is really what I ultimately wanted. And I reached out to someone I'd met during networking who was an HR executive. And I had met her a few times during my networking time. And she was also in job transition when I met her originally. But I really was just looking to have some advice from this person to help me with a 3-hour interview I was getting ready for. And as we had lunch, she basically let me know she was interested in hiring me. And that's how I got the job that I still have today. I never actually interviewed for this job, and I never competed with anyone else for the job either, which is just truly amazing. So while I did apply for jobs over the 16 months I was in job transition, the jobs that I actually were offered and took were through networking. So I'm not saying don't apply for direct jobs, but I'm highly recommending the networking that is emphasized a lot in the curriculum. So it's easy for me now to look back and see God's handiwork during my job transition journey. It's much harder to see it when you're in the middle of it, because there's just so many ups and downs when you're in job transition. For me personally, the key to making it through that was doing my part while trusting God to do his part. My part was to just do all the work, do the networking, do research on companies that I was interested in, create my star stories, practice my interviewing, and so on. My part was also to simply draw closer to God and trust him in who he is. God's part was doing all the opening and the closing of the doors along the way. And he did it, and he was faithful the entire time. To be honest, job transition was a really hard time for me. And I actually watched my husband go through it as well. And there was a part of that time where he was in job transition the same time I was. But it caused me to stop and seek Jesus in a more meaningful way. I learned that putting my identity in my job wasn't the best thing for me. but realizing my identity in Christ was much more secure. Crossroads Career Network helped me so much. It helped me make many connections and dear friends along the way. I can't recommend it enough. And I encourage you all to network with each other and all those that you meet through different small groups or any of the meetings that we have. And I also encourage you to give back yourself once you land your job, because we always want to hear from you as well. And to wrap it up, I just say, remember to do your part, work hard, and trust God to do his part. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. That was wonderful. And it reinforces that old adage that we always talk about. It's 80% or more of all jobs are attained through networking. Thanks for that example. We appreciate it. Thank you. So, and now I'd like to introduce John Munn, who has been president of Munn Enterprises, a unique exclusive business development firm for 30 years. He's helped organizations like Ernst Young, Accenture, Deloitte, Boeing, Bank of America discover innovative and refreshing ideas to design and develop business. Recently, he became the operations leader for Compassionate Hope, a nonprofit dedicated to ending human trafficking. He has many ideas that directly transfer to our job searches and career transitioning. And I'm going to turn it right over to John, and John, take it away. Might want to unmute.
Low tech. Tom, thank you very much. It's an honor to be with all of you. As Tom mentioned, I actually just went through a career change myself. So part of what I want to share with you is pretty relevant because it's fresh in my mind. I've had my own business for almost 33 years doing executive coaching. And Tom mentioned some of the clients I have. I've worked all over the United States for the last 33 years with these organizations that are major corporations. And then I even had a couple clients in Europe. But 4 months ago, I made a change to get into the nonprofit world. And I'll tell that story later on during this session, because I am in the world of fighting human trafficking now, which is near and dear to my heart, and it's quite a calling for me. And I'll go into how I made that transition because it's fascinating. It truly is. And I want to plant a seed right up front. If anybody who's watching this Zoom meeting has an interest in human trafficking, we need you. There's a lot of opportunity to fight human trafficking right now globally, in this country as well as globally. So I want to plant that seed early on. I call this session, Be the Voice, Not the Echo. Be the voice, not the echo. And I'd say that for a reason. There's an echo chamber of conformity in the marketplace right now. There has been for a while. And I think that, in fact, I really believe that in our marketplace, conformity reigns, R-E-I-G-N-S, conformity reigns, but exceptions rule. Conformity reigns, but exceptions rule. And as you're going through your job search, I would encourage you to do both these things. Don't be in the echo chamber. Break out of it. Be innovative, be creative, be different, not eccentric or weird, but refreshing. And know that to be exceptional, you got to break from the pack. And we'll talk about some of those kind of things. To kick us off, though, I actually am based in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's where I'm coming from tonight. And I'm going to take you all on a trip up to the Smoky Mountains, which is a few hours away from here. And our purpose for going there is to kick off end the summer season and kick off the fall season up in the beautiful Smokies. And we're going to the palatial home of a big executive who's very, very wealthy. And there's probably 100 people with us. And we're all back. It's 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. And we're all in the backyard of this huge palatial estate in the Smoky Mountains. And we're gathered around a huge Olympic-sized swimming pool up there in the mountains. Well, the host of the party comes down to greet us all. And he says, folks, welcome to my party. We're going to have a blast tonight. Take advantage of my hospitality, my food, my drink, have fun tonight. But I should tell you that I've filled my pool with alligators tonight. My Olympic-sized swimming pool is filled with alligators. And if any of you have enough guts to dive in one end of that pool and swim to the other end, if you make it alive, I'll give you anything you want. Anything you want, my wealth, my home, my riches, you can have it if you take me up on that challenge successfully. Well, he walks away. We're all laughing and snickling because the guy's crazy, clearly eccentric. But in fact, there are alligators in the pool. 15 minutes into the party, as we're mingling around, splash, all our eyes dart to the pool, and there in fact is a body in the pool. And this person is methodically making it from one end of the pool to the other. As we watch closely, clothes ripping, blood spurting, but the person makes it to the other end. But the host is watching this too, runs down to the end of the pool, pulls the poor soul out and says, my goodness, sir, no one's ever taken me up on this crazy challenge, but I'm a man of honor. I'll give you anything you want for what you just did. And the man said, what I want to know who pushed me in the pool. Now, I hope that you don't feel like that tonight in your job search, but I know it can be a lonely, lonely venture. And our purpose is to help you to fight the alligators a little bit better. Again, after 33 years of having my own business, I was in this for the past several months. And I'll tell you, sometimes you feel all alone out there. I can tell you that. So my purpose is to help you to navigate these waters a little bit better. And in fact, some of you have probably seen the movie Top Gun. I'm probably dating myself, but with Tom Cruise back a long time ago. And if you have seen that movie, at the very beginning of Top Gun, you'll notice that the commander of the group, of the squadron, Viper, is standing up in front of all the gentlemen, it's all men, who are in the squadron class, the Top Gun class. And he says to them, gentlemen, welcome to Miramar. Welcome to Top Gun. You're the top 8 naval aviators in the world. You're the best of the best. Then he stops and he says, we're going to make you better. And I've been associated with Crossroads Ministries for the last few years. And in fact, I was once one of those pictures that you just saw until they kicked me out. But the fact is, I have been involved in several meetings like this with Crossroads, and I'm always really impressed with the quality of individual that comes to these Zoom meetings, or when we're live, comes to the meetings and all the sessions that Tom and Harry Urschel talk about. There's a real high quality individual that shows up at these events. And I really am honored to work with you. But our purpose is to make you better. We think you're pretty good right now, but can you be better? Yep, you can. And you'll be a lot better if you break out of any echo chamber that you're in right now. If you're following any templates that are tired and old, break out of it right now. Just to bolster this whole idea about the difference between, what's in the conformity and who is exceptional, I want you to think about where you were 12 years ago in your life. Think about the year 2009. Who were you? In 2009, what job did you have then? What was your position? What was your family life like? Where did you live? Just get a feel for, in your mind, where were you in the year 2009? And there's a specific reason I'm asking this question. So 12 years ago, where were you? Now that you have where you were in your mind, hold that thought up here. If you were going to be in Shanghai tomorrow night, 8 o'clock tomorrow night, or London tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, or San Francisco tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, and you're on a street corner and you don't have a car, but you need to get to the other side of town in one of those 3 cities, Shanghai, London, or San Francisco, what would you probably do to hitch a ride? I would think you'd probably get out your phone, look at your Uber app, and get a ride with Uber in any of those cities. Now, just so you're aware, Uber did not exist in 2009. That's when they started. They weren't even around. Today, they're the world's largest car transportation company in the world, largest one in the world. Didn't exist 12 years ago. #1 today. Before COVID, in New York City, cab drivers were committing suicide in record numbers because Uber and Lyft were taking all their business. In 12 years, they went from nothing to the world's largest transportation company. Now, have they had their hiccups? Have they had their problems? Oh yeah. But I always believe that you either win or you learn. They took a lot of risks. They did a lot of things wrong, but yet they still succeed. So that's Uber. If you were going to go anywhere in the world and for a vacation or a business trip, and you didn't want to stay in a hotel, where would you probably stay? Well, I would guess you'd probably pull out your phone and go to the Airbnb app and pick a place anywhere in the world to stay. Now, what's significant about that? They weren't around 12 years ago. In the year 2009, they weren't a business. They started right then. And now, today, they're the world's largest accommodations company in the world. Largest company, bigger than any hotel chain, is Airbnb. Have they had their challenges? Absolutely. But in 12 short years, they went from nothing to the #1 in the world. You're all very familiar with staying at home and shopping on Amazon. Well, there's another company that you could do that with called Alibaba, and they're based in China. And Alibaba is a lot like Amazon, only not as big, but they do something really interesting in China. Every November 11th, they have something called Singles Day. And it's actually a day to really bolster all the single people in China, all the lonely hearts that don't have a mate. They have what's called Single Day on November 11th every year. And what they do is they reduce all their prices online for all those folks that are single. And really, it's opened up to everybody, but they call it Singles Day. Well, this past November 11th, they did $38 billion in one day in transaction. Alibaba did $38 billion in one day. And in fact, this year, 2020, they actually extended it from the 1st of November to the 11th. And in that 11-day span, they did $500 billion in sales. Now, why do I tell you all this? Again, conformity reigns, exceptions rule. What do Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, Alibaba all have in common? And there's other companies like them. What do they all have in common? What they have in common is they reduce the friction between buyers and sellers. They've reduced the friction between buyers and sellers. Why am I sharing this with you in the job search? Here's why. When I first did a presentation like this a couple years ago for Crossroads Ministry, before I did the presentation for 3 months, I called all of my clients, the Ernst & Youngs, the Deloittes, the Accentures, Bank of America. I work with 3 different Blue Cross Blue Shield organizations. I called decision makers and all those organizations, and I told them that I'm going to meet with a group of people like this that are looking for jobs. They're in job transition. I asked them this specific question. What are you looking for right now in the year 2019? What are you looking for whenever somebody comes in front of you and you're interviewing them for a job or for a position? And I talked to 45 executives who all are in the hiring mode. And you know that 40 of them told me, I'm looking for problem solvers. I'm looking for problem solvers. Now, when I was with the Ernst & Young real estate group, I was talking to a couple of the executives, and I thought they'd say, well, John, I need somebody that understands feasibility studies or cost reports or something specific to their industry. No, problem solvers. So I would press them. What does that mean? Well, I'm looking for people that can see around corners. See around corners. I'm looking for people that can anticipate problems, can anticipate challenges. I'm looking for people that are aspirational. Like they come in and they say, well, here's where you are now. Do you realize if you did this, this, and this different, you could be up here? So I'm looking for those kind of thinkers. And I really believe that's what you need to show whenever you're interviewing now. Just know that whatever you're interviewing for, what they're really looking for are problem solvers. Now, I said that was 2019. Before I did this session tonight, I called a handful of my buddies again. I said, anything changed in a couple of years? They said, nope, it's now more than ever. We need problem solvers. So if I were you, as you go through your job search, conformity reigns, exceptions rule. Who's exceptional? The problem solvers are exceptional. You just heard about Airbnb, you just heard about Uber. These organizations, they get it. They know what they're talking about when it comes to breaking from the pack. Does it take courage to do that? Yep. Does it take curiosity? Yep. And we're going to talk about some of those things. But I would encourage you to think that way starting now. I would also encourage you tonight, wherever you are, to take notes. I'm a really unorthodox speaker in that I'm a little bit shabby. I just kind of go, and I don't use any PowerPoint. I use no technology whatsoever because my children who are age 30 and 27 aren't here to help me. So anyway, I do encourage you to take some notes as I speak to you tonight, because there's some relevant information I'm going to share with you. So reduce friction. Understand that it's your role to anticipate problems. It's your role to be aspirational. It's your role to help see around corners for your organization. Don't just wait. Get on the balls of your feet, not your heels. And I say that all the time to people. Operate in the balls of your feet, not your heels. And you will be as good as you want to be. I also say this a lot. If you were to do 10 pull-ups, if you were to do 10 pull-ups in the gym, what's the most important pull-up out of the 10? If you're doing 10 pull-ups, what's the most important one? Well, it's actually the 11th one. It's the one you didn't have to do. And that's what employers are looking for now. They're those kind of people. In fact, I challenge my employees even. I say to them, you better be this way yourselves. In fact, I was talking to somebody recently from a Big Four accounting and consulting firm, and he was talking about, he's in the hiring mode right now and he's interviewing people, and he was rather uppity about some of his views. And I said to him, you do realize that you're being interviewed too. You do realize when a prospect or a candidate is sitting across from you, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. And he's like, oh, McMunn, back off. But I really do believe that. So they better show up too, because people are more selective than ever right now. So problem solving, let's talk about this for a moment. Some of you probably who are probably older in this audience had a cell phone back in 2009, perhaps 2007, 2008, called a BlackBerry. And a BlackBerry was the hottest cell phone on the market in 2007, 2008, 2009. In fact, in 2009, BlackBerry had 54% of the cell phone market, 54%. That's a huge market share, huge, dominating market share. So 2009, they had 54% of that market. Now, if you had a BlackBerry like I did, you'll know that half the phone was taken up by a keyboard. Now, I like the keyboard because I have those little pebbles on the QWERTY board that were kind of pebbly to touch, and that actually was part of their value. I mean, that was part of their value proposition. In fact, the leaders of BlackBerry at the time would tell you that was part of the reason people loved the BlackBerry, was just the QWERTY board. Well, a guy named Johnny Ive, who's a design engineer with Apple, came along, and he said, I'm always intrigued by BlackBerry because they're so successful, but I don't understand why anybody, any organization who's making cell phones would invest half of a cell phone on a keyboard when I can create a touch screen to bring up that keyboard anytime I want, along with about 9 million other things on that touch screen. And that actually was presented to the folks at BlackBerry, and they just laughed at Johnny Ive's idea. And they said, man, this guy he's out of touch. He doesn't know our market at all. Well, evidently he did, because you know the end of this story. 2 years later, BlackBerry had about 11% of the market. 3 years later, they had about 1% of the market. And Apple just took it over. And at that time, some of their competitors came along as well. And as we're speaking, I mean, iPhones are off the charts. So there's too many people that think like BlackBerry, though, and they're not problem solving. They're not aspirational. They're looking for what's around the corner. What should we be thinking about? What we're not thinking about. In fact, I suffer from this myself. I've been the single parent of two boys for the last 17, 18 years. And my sons are very close with me. In fact, I live in Nashville right now, and one of my sons, who's 30 years old, he works for Dave Ramsey here in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville. My other son, I convinced him to move to Nashville as well. He's 27. They're both married with kids. But I've been a single dad to these two boys for the last 17 years. And so when they were 10 and 13, it was me and them. And we've been very, very close ever since. So Father's Day was very important in our lives. Actually, Father's Day was important to me in our lives, not as much to them. But I would make it a point starting about January just for those boys to start thinking about what they want to get Dad for Father's Day. And I truly would plant seeds all the time with them. I know a lot of fathers would probably say, oh, kids, don't worry about me. I got enough. Not me. I want stuff. So I say, boys, here's what I want. So several years ago, I said, you know what, guys, for Father's Day this year, here's what I want. I want my greatest hits, the music that I love. And you guys know all my favorite songs. I want my greatest hits, my favorite songs, all on a cassette tape. Those words actually came out of my mouth. I said, I want my favorite songs on a cassette tape. Dad's greatest hits. So my kids said, fine, Dad, got it. So Father's Day comes that year, and they give me my gift, and I'm opening up this wee little package. I'm thinking, what could this be? It doesn't look like a cassette tape. It was a very small strip of metal, a real thin strip of metal, and it had earbuds attached to it. And I'm looking at this little piece of metal, and I said, boys, did you not get the memo? I wanted a cassette tape. And my boys are now looking at each other like, wow, Dad, try to catch up. And what I was holding in my hand, as I'm this old fossil, was an iPod. And I'm sure some of you guessed that. And I'm looking at this saying, really? And there's like, Dad, this has so many hits on it, you won't believe it. Put the earbuds in. Well, in about 9 seconds, I forgot all about a cassette tape. You know, all of a sudden I'm married to the iPod. And now I've got my iPhone that has a zillion songs on it on Spotify. It's just funny how our mindset is, we're locked in the old days. It's almost like when Henry Ford in 1900 was asked, when you created the car, the assembly line for the car, did you go to your customers? Is that what they were looking for? And he said, no, if I went to my customers, they would have wanted a faster horse. Well, that was my mindset. So the point is, when it comes to problem solving, that's what you are now. You've got to be problem solvers for these companies you're looking to go work with. You have got to be the echo, not the voice. You have to be the voice, not the echo in the echo chamber. Be thinking constantly when you go to these organizations that you're going to interview with, research them, research the heck out of them, figure out where they've been, where are they now, where could they go with your help. Help them, reimagine the future using your input. And I mean, think that way all the time right now. That's what decision makers are looking for, whether they tell you that or not. That's what they're looking for. So, with that in mind, I want to shift gears to part of what you need to be doing whenever you're having these meetings with the executives is engaging in a conversation, not a presentation, but a conversation. And one of the best ways to weave in problem solving is to understand the steps of how to problem solve. And to help me with that, I actually heard a story years ago that was just phenomenal. In fact, it's one of those stories where if anybody says one person can't make a difference, just tell them this story. And here's the story. On May 3rd, 1980, a little girl who was 13 years old was walking down the street in Fair Oaks, California, a suburb of Sacramento. And her name was Carrie Leitner. Carrie Leitner is 13 years old. It's a Saturday. She's walking on the sidewalk, leaving a softball practice, going to a church picnic in Fair Oaks, California, on the sidewalk. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a car comes flying up the street, careens over the sidewalk, onto the sidewalk, and hits Carrie Leitner and throws her 100 feet, and she dies instantly on that sidewalk. Well, her mother, Candy Leitner, is about 2 miles away. She's a residential real estate worker. She's showing a house 2 miles away from where her daughter was walking on a sidewalk. She quickly gets the news that her daughter's been the victim of a terrible accident. And by the way, it was a hit and run accident. The person that hit her took off. So she comes to the scene of the accident and collapses. She's devastated, as you can imagine, steeped in grief, until she discovers that the person that hit her daughter was drunk. And the person that hit her daughter was in jail the night before for hitting somebody else, not killing the person, but hitting somebody else just a few days before. And then she found out this individual had 4 DUIs in the past year. And yet he was allowed to go up that street on a Saturday afternoon and hit Carrie Leitner, who was 13 years old, and kill her. So you probably know this story now. Candy Leitner, filled with rage, goes to her kitchen table over the next few days, and she decides this is unacceptable. And she starts to research this whole idea of drunk driving. She calls every police officer she can find. She calls people in the highway department. She calls everybody in law enforcement she knows. And she said, I want to walk through 4 steps with you. I want to find out, what is this problem? How is this a problem? In the year 1980, how do we have socially accepted homicide? We allow this to happen on the streets of Fair Oaks, California. So she started with this question. This is where you might want to take notes. How do you solve problems? Well, Candy Leitner, the mother of Carrie Leitner, said, I'm going to go through 4 steps. What is the problem? A problem well-defined is a problem half solved. So she started with, what is the problem of drunk driving? And how did my daughter get hit like that? What's the problem? And she put a magnifying glass over that. And she defined it with every law enforcement person and all the experts she could get. Then she said, 2, what are the causes of this problem? So we know what the problem is now. What are the causes of the problem? List them. And for hours, they went through every possible cause of this problem, of the fact that her daughter got hit by a drunk driver in the year 1980. Then she went to the third part of the problem-solving formula. What are the possible solutions to this problem? What are some possible solutions? Again, brainstorm. What are possible solutions to make this thing go away or solve this problem? And then she went to the fourth step. What is the best possible solution? What's the best possible solution to solve this problem that killed my daughter? And what the best possible solution was in Candy Leitner's mind was to start a grassroots organization called Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That's what she called it, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And it was shortened to MADD, M-A-D-D. Well, as the organization grew, she got a board of directors, and all of a sudden they said, Candy, we know that you're pretty livid about this, but let's change the name to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, not drivers. It's a little too personal. She didn't like that change, by the way, but it's actually called Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Now, in the year 2021, today, any state patrolman in Minnesota or any state that you're in will tell you that since 1980, traffic fatalities with alcohol involved have been cut in half based on Mothers Against Drunk Drivers influence. MADD's influence has cut drunk driving fatalities in half in the United States of America. It's just phenomenal what she started with those 4 questions. What is the problem? What are the causes of the problem? What are some possible solutions? What's the best possible solution? In your job search, as you're identifying the organizations you want to work with, and I would suggest that you do that. Don't just look at one ad and say who's looking. Go to companies that aren't looking, at least you don't think they are, and be a problem solver. Show up and tell them what you could do for them. And I really mean that. Be proactive, get on the balls of your feet, not your heels, and figure this stuff out. And I'm telling you, walk through those steps. Go find solutions. Be aspirational. What could they be that they're not right now? So problem solving, seeing around corners. But to do this well, when you get in front of these decision makers that are talking about you and your future with them, you have to create a conversation with them. And a conversation is also 4 steps. Number 1, you get rapport with them. Then 2, you explore things with them. 3, you demonstrate you can help them if you can help them, or you tell them you can't and you move on. 4th is you open the relationship to the next step, okay? So I call it the REDO formula, R-E-D-O. Rapport, explore, demonstrate, open. That's a conversation. Rapport, you get rapport, you explore with them, you demonstrate you can help them, and then you go to opening the relationship to the next step. And I think you can control that. You can take control of what the next step is. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the power of conversations. Some of you who are listening right now or being involved in this have heard of a name called Maya Lin. Maya Lin is a woman who at age 21 in the mid-'80s was an art and architect student at Yale University. And Maya Lin is very, very well known now because Maya Lin, oops, I'm seeing, so, okay, could you repeat the 4 steps about having a conversation after finding the problem? Well, actually, the 4 steps are the problem-solving formula is, what is the problem? What are the causes of the problem? What are the possible solutions? What's the best possible solution? What are possible solutions? What's the best possible solution? And then you have to figure that out. What is the best possible solution? For Candy Leitner, it was to create the organization Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. The second thing I just talked about was the 4 steps of a conversation is rapport, explore, demonstrate, open. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So Maya Lin is the architect art student from Yale University. In the 1980s, our government decided, you know what, we need to create some kind of a monument to honor the fallen in Vietnam. In the 1980s, we had no monument to honor the fallen in Vietnam. Part of the reason we didn't was the Vietnam conflict was not a popular war. It was not popular at all. And some of you who are older will remember that. I remember it well because I'm the youngest of 7 children. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my 3 older brothers all served in Vietnam, all 3 of them. Over a 9-year period of time, I had 3 brothers that served in Vietnam. So I am intimately involved with that conflict. And in fact, my oldest brother, Dave, actually went on 3 different tours and was shot down behind enemy lines. And fortunately, all 3 of my brothers came home. But I will tell you, they didn't get a very good reception when they came home. That war was not popular for a lot of reasons. To this day, it's not popular. However, the government decided in the 1980s, let's create a monument. So what they did was they created a contest, and they said, everybody in the United States, you can enter this contest. Who's going to come up with the best monument idea to honor the fallen in Vietnam? Now, they had some parameters which were interesting. The government said in their RFP, their request for proposal, if you will, they said, we want this monument to be marble. We want it to be white. We want this monument to be above ground. We want this monument to blend into all the other monuments in Washington, D.C. We want it to be compatible with the family of monuments in Washington, D.C. Marble, white, above ground, looks like all the rest. Well, I'll bet you some of you on this call have been to the monument that represents the fallen in Vietnam. It is known now as the Vietnam Memorial Wall, W-A-L-L. It's a wall, and it is nothing like what they said they wanted, okay? Maya Lin was the one who won the contest, and Maya Lin created a wall with over 50,000 names are on it. So all the fallen in Vietnam are on that wall. And she created something it was an anomaly. It was not at all anything. In fact, it was 180 degrees different than what the government said they wanted. So what did she do? How did Maya Lin convince our government that, you know what, you probably ought to think differently about what this monument looks like? Well, here's how she did it. She decided when she saw the contest develop, she said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to enter this contest and make it pretty exceptional, okay, be the voice, not the echo. Conformity reigns, exceptions rule. If I'm going to be exceptional, what should I do to ensure I'm exceptional? I come up with an exceptional idea. What she did was she decided to interview Vietnam vets for 30 days straight, like morning till night. I'm going to interview as many vets that came back from Vietnam as I can. I'm going to take notes all day, every day for 30 straight days. So what she was saying is, I'm going to engage in conversations for 30 days with Vietnam vets. I'm going to get rapport. I'm going to explore things with them. And then I'm going to go to the government and demonstrate, you know what, here's what we ought to be doing. And I will persuade them based on evidence, 30 days of evidence, that the white, the marble, the above ground, blend in, that's not what you want. And she took those notes for 30 days, and she created a wall that a lot of you are familiar with now. If you haven't been there in person, at least you know what it's like. Well, what's interesting about this Vietnam Wall is it's underground, actually. If you walk in from the wrong angle, you don't even know it's there. It's actually a wall that's built below ground. It starts at zero inches and goes like this to an apex of 12 feet tall in the middle. And it's black, and it's got over 50,000 names etched on it. And Maya Lin said this. She said, what I created was an open book that can never be shut. So if you look at the Vietnam Memorial Wall from an aerial view down, you're looking at an open book that cannot be shut. It's an open book that can't be shut. That's what she got out of 30 days of conversations with Vietnam vets. She got evidence based on her conversations with vets that that's what it ought to look like. So in 1992, I went to the Vietnam Memorial Wall with my three brothers, who all, again, survived the Vietnam War, came home. And we're walking down into the wall, and it's just packed with all kinds of soldiers and loved ones and all these people. And my three brothers are kind of macho guys, much like myself. And all three of them, almost in unity, started to sniffle, and then shed some tears and started to cry. And a lot of people in that area were very emotional. It's an emotional experience to be at the Vietnam Memorial Wall. Now, back in the 1990s, in the 2000 area, I actually was in Washington, D.C. a lot with a couple clients. And I was a runner back then. I'm not so much anymore, but I used to run the monuments all the time when I was in D.C. And an interesting thing back then, I'm not sure if it's the same anymore, but in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, you could run around every monument in Washington, D.C. Every monument, you could run around them. Couldn't run around the Vietnam Memorial. Can't go down there and run. Not allowed. You could walk your dog around every monument in Washington, D.C. Can't walk your dog around the Vietnam Memorial Wall. Why? Too sacred. It's too sacred. So here's the government saying, let's create a monument that blends with all the others. Maya Lin engages in serious, meaningful conversation, rapport, explore. take notes. And she came up with the most visited monument in Washington, D.C. by far. It's always the most visited wall by far. And it's such an emotional experience because she engaged. She got emotionally involved with the folks that mattered. And that's what she came up with. My point to you is it's only through conversation that you're going to get to exceptional, to get to these problem-solving results that you're looking for. Another interesting one is this is just so fascinating to me. I don't know if any of you are fans of the Olympics. I have not been a big fan of late of the Olympics, but in 2005, in fact, on July 6, 2005, remember this date, July 6, 2005, a decision was made in Singapore that would be worth at least $15 billion to the city of London. Now, what was the decision that was made? It was on that day that the city of London was awarded the 2012 Summer Olympic Games, okay? 2005, they're awarded the Summer Games for 2012, all right? And you say, well, so what? Who cares? Well, here's why you should care about this. Do you know that London had no shot of getting those Olympics? They didn't have a prayer. They were invited to the mix as a courtesy. They were up against Paris, Madrid, New York City, and Moscow, those four cities. And they had no shot at beating any of those four cities. In fact, people thought it was wired to Paris because Paris had actually hosted other Olympics successfully and had all the infrastructure in place. They had the stadiums, they had the money, they had fan support, they had everything going for them to win those games. They had transportation, you name it. London had nothing. The other three cities also had the same as Paris. They had all that. London had nothing. In fact, their chances were so dire that the night before the Olympic team from London went to pursue the games, the London Evening Times had an editorial saying, please don't get on that plane. You're going to embarrass the city of London if you try to win the 2012 games. That's how bad their situation was. So how did they win the games? So again, they went, they presented, and the four cities that they're up against went back to their hometowns, and they created 75 slide PowerPoint presentations, letting the Olympic Committee know how wonderful their cities were, okay? How wonderful the venues were, how wonderful everything was. So those four cities that were competing with London all went back and created presentations. They looked at themselves in the mirror and they created presentations. London couldn't come up with one slide, let alone 74 more. So they took a different tack. They said to the head of the International Olympic Committee in 2005, hey, would you mind if we interviewed all the Olympic Committee members, maybe in groups of 10, because at the time there were 107 people on the International Olympic Committee. There were 107 members, and London's team said, can we interview all of them, have conversations with all of them? And the head of the IOC said, why not? Go ahead. So they did. The other four cities are working on their PowerPoints. Keep that in mind. London is having conversations with their target audience, okay? And they're sitting down. Now let's talk about their target audience. Here's the demographics and psychographics of those 107 members of the Olympic Committee, okay? All right. They are almost all men from all over the world, almost all former Olympians, 107 former Olympians from all over the world, and they are average age, 65 years old. 20 of the members were over the age of 80, all right? So what do we have here? We have a group of men, group of individuals, a lot of ego, a lot of testosterone, a lot of pride, and that's their audience. And London has nothing to offer, but they engage in conversations and they get these people emotionally involved with them. They get rapport, they explore, and then they say to them in their exploration, let us just say something that's very blunt. Average age 65 years old, 20 of you are over the age of 80. At the 2012 games, now this is 7 years later, if the 2012 games are the last Olympic Games you're ever associated with, what would you want your legacy to be? How would you want to go out? If they were the last Olympics you were associated with, ego, testosterone, pride, what would you want your legacy to be? what do you want to see happen in those games? And you know that they said nothing about infrastructure. They said nothing about the stadiums. They said nothing about the transportation. They said nothing about fan support. They said this. They said, we believe that the average child, ages 4 to 21, average young person, has no interest in the Olympics anymore. They're all, even back in 2005, they have too many distractions. When I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we had 4 channels on our TV. Back in 2005, my kids had 105 or 505 channels. You know what I mean? They had so many distractions. In fact, I'll never forget when my kids were in high school at Eden Prairie High School, and because I lived in Minnesota at the time, a friend of mine said, John, if you'll notice, when any kid your kid's age is in front of the TV watching football or watching a sport or watching anything, they will have 2 more screens in front of them. They'll have a TV screen, and then they'll have a cell phone, and then they'll have a computer or an iPad. So I didn't really believe that because my kids are technology savvy, but they're not nutcases. Well, sure enough, I'm at home one day and the football game's on, and about 10 kids, boys and girls, are at my house in 2009. They're all at my house in front of a TV, and I'm looking out as I'm making them some nachos. And sure enough, every kid in that room, including my own kids, had 3 screens in front of them. So back to 2005, the Olympic Committee is saying, how do you get that group back involved in being involved in the Olympics? That's what we want to see. That would be the legacy. So the London team said, well, if we could accomplish that for you, do we win these games? They said, they're all yours. And they put the plan together starting that day. And they got every one of those Olympic Committee members emotionally involved with them, said, here's what we're going to do. Here's our game plan. And they went online and they had all kinds of programs that they developed over the next few years for those children to get back connected to the games. And keep in mind, this is 7 years till the games. So they had all that time to get the infrastructure, to get the hotels, to get the stadiums built, to get the hotels they needed, to get the fan support. They got everything together. And the 2012 Summer Games, look it up, are the most popular summer games in the history of the world. And on September 27th of 2012, when that cauldron was lit, if you recall, in almost every Olympic Games, the cauldron is always lit by somebody famous, somebody who's known globally, Muhammad Ali, or somebody that everybody knows, lights that cauldron every year in the Olympics. That year, August 27th, when that cauldron was lit, it was lit by 7 children that nobody knew except their parents. They picked 7 kids from the UK to light that cauldron. That was their commitment to say kids are involved now. And the kids were really involved in that. I don't know that that's the case in the last Olympic, quite frankly, but my point in telling that story is, along with the Maya Lin story, the Vietnam Memorial Wall, the power of conversations. And I mean, when you get in front of that person, when you're the candidate, you're talking to a decision maker, engage in a conversation. You take control of the rapport, of the explore, demonstrate you can help them if you can. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Speaking of conversations, I always wonder, you know, I look at this phenomenal company called Starbucks, and I think, how did Maxwell House and Folgers and all these companies from the old days, how did they miss this? Why are they not Starbucks? How is Maxwell House not Starbucks? How did they miss this? I mean, I just am amazed at the Starbucks phenomenon. And now some other companies are just like them with Caribou Coffee and some others. But so I researched and studied Starbucks in the 1980s. They actually started in late 1980s, when Harold Schultz actually bought some stores that already existed in Seattle, Washington. And he created this global phenomenon called Starbucks. Well, you know, it was Starbucks, but he certainly grew it. What I didn't know was Howard Schultz, his idea was to make Starbucks a third place. He found out through conversations, and he had tons of conversations about, you know, if I were to create something new, something you don't have, something that's missing in the 1980s, what would it be? And he had conversation after conversation after conversation with everyone he could get in front of. You know what they told him? They're missing the front porch. Like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the front porch was prevalent in the United States. People hung out on the front porch. And that's what he discovered. In the 1980s, that started to go away. I have to tell you, again, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we had a house, 7 children in my family. We had aunts and uncles, we had parents, we had dogs, we had cats. Everybody came to our porch. we didn't even invite them. They just showed up. And we're listening to the Pittsburgh Pirates in the summer on the radio, transistor radio. The front porch was a gathering place. Well, really what Starbucks was created wasn't to make a big $5 cup of coffee, because nobody was looking for that, because coffee in the 1980s was about 25 cents a cup. Well, Howard Schultz comes along and says, you know what? I'm going to make coffee about $3 a cup in the 1980s, or maybe $4. I'm going to make you stand in line for 8 minutes, and you're going to pay. You're going to do this. You're going to show up. And it's stunning that we do this. But what he was really making was what he calls a third place. It's a gathering place. And but it only became what it became because of conversations. I want to hit that hard. Get rapport with people, explore, demonstrate you can help them, and then go to the next step. A key ingredient in communication and conversation is storytelling. I think you need to tell stories. All I've done so far in this Zoom call with you is tell you stories. That's all I've done. And the reason I've done that is, in my research over years and years and years, is the marketplace likes stories. We all like stories. And that's what you need to be doing in your conversations. So I told you I made a very serious career change recently. I've had my own business for 33 years, almost 33 years in the executive coaching world. And about 10 years ago, I read a book called Halftime. And I was about 55 years old at the time. I'm 64 years old right now. So I read Halftime, and this book was written by a guy named Bob Buford, and it's written to a person who's had a pretty successful year up to their 50s. And the analogy is, you're in the halftime of your life right now. You're in the locker room. You've had a successful first half. How are you going to make the second half of your life significant? So the premise of Halftime is, in fact, the subtitle of the book is Moving from Success to Significance. That's the subtitle of the book. So I read this book, and I'm a Christian, and there's something that's haunted me forever, and it's 2 verses that are the same story. Matthew 9:37 and Luke 10:2 say the same thing, and that is, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And I would go to church during missions conferences, and if you go to Grace Church, any of you, or almost any church, if you go to a missions conference, you might hear those verses. And if you go to Grace Church in Eden Prairie, Dave Gibson, the missions leader, will hammer that into you. And I would always be haunted, or I was tugged by those verses. I had to be doing something more significant with my life than executive coaching. So I read the book Halftime when I'm 55 years old, and I'm thinking, and by the way, Halftime is a blueprint. The book is a blueprint to how to do this. But I wasn't sure what my mission field would be. I just didn't know what was my calling. So 5 years ago, I picked up a client called 180 Health Partners. And it's a startup, way different than my big corporations I work with. A friend of mine was the CEO, and he called me and he said, hey, can you help me with this startup? And I said, what's our startup? What are we doing? He said, my company exists to serve opioid addicted mothers. Moms who are addicted to heroin is what we're going to do. We're going to work with them. We're going to support them. And I said, man, is there really a universe of those people out there? He said, oh yeah. Well, in fact, they've been a client of mine for 5 years until recently. And opioid addicted moms are everywhere. Opioid addicted people are everywhere. And we grew this business in Tennessee, into Florida, into Kentucky, and into Texas. And that CEO just sold this company about 4 years ago to another healthcare company called Mindula that has taken them all over the United States now. So why do I tell you this? So I'm working with these moms who are been exploited. They're all from broken homes. They have horrible lives. It's just, this whole world of addiction is just dark, as you know. So COVID starts, and I'm working with these moms in rural Tennessee, rural Kentucky, in the middle of nowhere. And COVID starts, and I don't know if you know this, but opioid addicted mothers love alcohol anonymous meetings. They go to them physically all the time. They depend on them. So I decide we're going to try to get these moms on online AA meetings, okay? So I start making these calls to these moms saying, we'll get you on AA meetings online. Well, I called one woman in Eastern Tennessee named Sarah. And I talked to Sarah about, well, I'll get her on online. She said, and by the way, Sarah is 32 years old. She has a daughter who's 10 years old, okay? Single mom, just lost her job as a waitress in rural Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, middle of nowhere. So I said, Sarah, I'm going to get you on online meetings for AA. She said, John, I don't even have a computer. Why do you think I can be online? Which I said I probably should have anticipated that. So I said, Sarah, I will go to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Tennessee, get Medicaid dollars to get your computer. She said, no, John, don't worry about me. And she said to me, I'm going to move to Nashville and I'm going to give my daughter to my sister. Okay. Now remember I said those words because I'm going to come back to this in a second. I'm going to move to Nashville. I'm going to give my daughter to my sister. Boom. Okay. So I said to her, well, what are you going to do in Nashville? And she said these words, I'm going to be a prostitute. That's what I'm going to do in Nashville. And I'm just feeling like this naive kid. Like, what? What'd you just say? No shame, no apology, no nothing. I'm going to be a prostitute in Nashville. So after I swallowed hard on that, I said, well, why would you give your daughter to your sister? And she hesitated. She said, I'm going to tell you something that's going to probably shock you, but I'm tempted to traffic my daughter. And folks, I'm just now punched in the stomach. I'm in kindergarten. I don't even know what she's talking about. And I said, Sarah, help me. What do you mean? And she said, I would take her to a big amusement park like Dollywood. In the morning, I'd ride some rides with her. I'd put her on a bench at 1 o'clock and say, a man's going to come and take your hand and you do whatever he wants you to do. And that little girl will do that again at 4 o'clock and she'll do it again at 7:30 that night. And days will turn into weeks and weeks will turn into months. There's a very good chance that she'll be addicted to heroin herself quickly. She will have STDs. She may consider committing suicide within a few years, or she'll be murdered. And that's her life. And folks, that was my halftime moment. I said, I'm changing my career. I am changing my career. And I left that conversation with Sarah. And by the way, she did not traffic her daughter, but she did move to Richmond or move to Nashville. And I just started to do what you're doing. I researched every organization I could find that was involved in human trafficking. And what I did, and this is where I say exceptions rule, be the voice, not the echo. I decided my way of getting in front of the decision makers I wanted to get in front of was I identified about 45 organizations that I wanted to get in front of, okay, if I could. And what I did was I wrote them a letter. I wrote all of them a letter. And what I said was this. I wrote them a letter and I said, my purpose for writing to you is to tee up a conversation with you. I'm quite interested in discussing the possibility of working within your organization. In an effort to set the stage for that conversation, please read the following start of a story that I want to share with you. And what I did was I started to tell them a story about my halftime experience to meeting with Sarah. And I stopped the story right when I said, Sarah, why are you moving to Nashville? And why would you give your daughter to your sister? I wrote them a letter and I stopped the story right then. And then I said at the end of it, I'll look forward to sharing the rest of the story with you. I'll call you this coming Tuesday to set a time to talk and see what direction you want to go. And I sent that to a number of organizations. 18 organizations took my call. 18 out of over 40. 18. In fact, one guy called me and said, John, I'm not going to hire you. I'm not looking for anybody, but can you tell me the rest of that story? So why am I telling you this? I think that we should be thinking this way in our job search. Why don't we just make up a resume and just respond to whatever the situation dictates? Why don't we not get creative and send them the start of a story like I did and see what happens? It's a compelling story. And so once they got on with me, I said, here's the end of the story, the one I told you. And then I said to them, now I've researched your organization and here's what I think you need. I think you need some ideas on fundraising because every nonprofit under the sun needs fundraising, I can tell you. And even a lot of organizations that are not nonprofit. And then I said, you also need better awareness. I looked at your website, I looked at this, and I was very assertive. I told them where I think they have areas that we could improve. So I was aspirational. I was helping them see around corners. And I would encourage you, do this. Write a letter. Tell a story, but don't give them the punchline. Tell them, I'm going to share with you the start of a story. And then I'm going to call you next week and I'll share the rest of it with you. It piques curiosity. So just so you're aware, there's 4 parts to a story. There's the setting, like when I told you the London story, there's a setting for that story. July 6, 2005, the London Pursuit team went. July 6th, setting, there's a setting. 2, there are characters in the story. In the London story, London Pursuit team, there's 107 members of the Olympic Committee. They're all characters in the story. The third thing in a story is a sequence of events. London received the invitation. The team preps. The city of London is discouraged. They asked to interview the IOC meetings, or members. London wins the games. September 27th, 7 children light the cauldron. So there's a sequence of events in the story. Again, setting, characters, sequence of events. Then the fourth part of the story is there's a conflict. There's always a conflict in the story. What was the conflict in the London story? City of London had no reason to try to win those games. No fan support, no transportation, no infrastructure, blah, 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 blah. There's a conflict. Every story is a conflict. That's why all these television shows and movies are so popular. They all have conflicts in them. Then there's a resolution to the story. London team wins the games through the value and the power of conversation. They didn't create presentations, they conducted conversations. Setting, characters, sequence of events, conflict, resolution. That's a story. Think of your own and send a letter to your prospects and say, hey, I've examined your organization and I want to share a story with you, the start of a story. I'll tell you the rest when we talk. Now, there's 4 questions that everybody is wondering, 4 questions when they interview you. And this is where it was Gina Gilbert at the beginning of this who said she felt like she was a sale, she was the product. She was the product in a sale. They want to know, anybody who's selling anything and anybody who's buying anything wants to know these 4 things. Is what you're selling a good service? Is what you're selling credible? Is it a good service? So when you go in your interview, when you're a candidate, are you credible? Are you a good service, a good offering for that company? Are you a good offering? Are you credible? Second thing they're wondering in their mind is, will you do what you say you'll do? Can I trust you? When you're sitting in front of me and you're telling your story and you're talking about exploring and demonstrating you can help me, can I trust you? Will you do what you say you'll do? So again, the first thing they're wondering, is this really a good offering you're telling me about? Second is, can I trust you? Are you going to do what you say you'll do? Third thing they want to know is, are you worth the investment I'm going to ask you to pay for this? Okay, in money, in the time it's going to take to train you, in the energy, in the hassle of working with you. Are you worth the investment I'm going to ask you to pay? The fourth thing I want to know is, who says so besides you? You're paid to say you're wonderful. We're going to pay you. But who isn't paid to say you're wonderful? Tell me about people that you've had some real, who would say to me, I've had real value out of working with Gina Gilbert. I've had real value of working with Harry Urschel. Who are those people? I want to know about them. And that's what you have to do in your demonstration. So you get rapport, you explore, then you demonstrate you can help them by answering those 4 questions. Then the last thing you do is open the relationship to the next step. And I think you say something like this, you know, Chuck, based on this conversation, it looks like I'm a good fit for your organization and for this position. And I'd love to work with you. What are your thoughts? That's what I said to all these organizations in the trafficking world that I interviewed with. That's how I ended every one of my conversations that I felt like I wanted to work with. Based on this conversation, it looks like I'm a good fit for your outfit and for this position. I'd love to work with you. What are your thoughts? And some of the thoughts were like, we have to think about it. And some of the thoughts were like, where do you sign up? My point is, you take control at the end. Don't wait. Take initiative. Get on the balls of your feet, not your heels. Okay? So one other thing I want to share with you, and I think this is so fascinating. My son, CJ, is 30 years old. But when he was 14 years old, we lived in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. He got his first job at age 14 working for Cold Stone Creamery near Eden Prairie Center. When he was 14, he got this job. And every job he pursued after age 14, he got. All through his high school years, he went to Lifetime Fitness, got a job. Everywhere he went, he got a job. So by the time he's 19 years old, he's not cocky when it comes to getting jobs, but he's pretty self-assured. So he says to me, he called me from college. He was at a college in Southern California called Biola University. And he called me, he said, Dad, I'm going to get a job parking cars at a fabulous hotel in where's it called? Dana Point, California. It's the St. Regis Monarch Hotel. It's one of these beautiful 5-star hotels. So I'm going to get a job working there. And I said, great, when do you start? These are what I didn't even interview yet, but I think I'll get it. I have the interview tomorrow with one of the managers. Again, he's a college kid, 19 years old. So I said, great. So he calls me the next day after the interview and he said, man, Dad, couldn't have gone better. 30 minutes, I got this one. I said, great, when do you start? He said, well, I didn't actually get it yet, but I know I got it. I couldn't have gone better. He's going to let me know soon. So he called me the next day and he's brokenhearted. I mean, over the phone, he's near to tears. He said, Dad, you're not going to believe it. I did not get that job. And I'm just, in my heart of hearts, I'm thinking, not bad, because he needed to be taken down a notch and a little humbled. And he said these words to me. He said, Dad, I don't know what to do. And I always taught my 2 sons, you don't know what to do yet. Always put the word yet there. I said, you know what, CJ, here's what you should do. You should call that manager you interviewed with, if he'll take your call, and just say to him, hey, listen, I know that I didn't get the position. Thank you for the letter you sent me. I got it. I want to know what I could have done better. I called a postmortem. You know, I'm a young guy. I'm trying to get a job with an organization like yours. What did I miss? What could I have done better in that interview? And so he made the call. And to the manager's credit, he took CJ's call. And he said, CJ, I'm glad you called me because I do want to tell you what you did wrong. He said, I really like you. In fact, he said, I thought this guy really could fit into our organization. But he said, CJ, for 30 minutes, from the time you walked into my office till the time you left, you never smiled one time. You did not smile one time in 30 minutes. Now you have to understand, when you're parking cars for the St. Regis Monarch Hotel, you are literally the face of our hotel. These people are driving up here in their BMWs and their Mercedes and their Jaguars. You're the first person they're going to see. And man, I didn't think you had it in your DNA to even smile. We need cheerful people here. We need people that are upbeat, great attitude. You were very serious the whole time, and I can't have you parking cars here. Well, let me tell you, he's been smiling ever since, that kid has. He works for Dave Ramsey now in Franklin, and that kid is so upbeat and you can't believe it. My point in this is, understand your audience, understand the job you're seeking, and be cheerful, be upbeat. That's what we're looking for now. I'll end this real quick and with this. If you do have any questions or anything that I can help you with leaving here, I'd be more than happy to talk to you offline anytime. Real quick, just pretend there's a big mountainscape in front of us. There's snow-capped mountains in front of us, and soaring above the mountains are 2 birds. One's an eagle, one's a buzzard, and they're soaring above the mountains. Well, these 2 birds have a lot in common. I don't know if you know this, but the eagle has a very sharp beak, a very sharp claw, talons, and so does the buzzard. They're both exactly the same in a lot of respects. But down below at the base of the mountain, a little animal moves real fast. When that eagle sees the animal, the eagle says, make it happen, go get it, lunch, dinner, go, make it happen. That buzzard, when he sees the same animal or she sees it, he or she says, I'll wait till it dies. I'll pick up the leftovers. I'll wait. My point in sharing this story with you is, as you listen to this presentation, my conversation with you, and as you get involved with anything with Minnesota Crossroads, feed the eagle all it's worth. Get on the balls of your feet, not your heels, and go make it happen. And I wish you all the success in the world. Trust God. And if you need to talk with me offline, let me know. I can give you all my contact information. My best number, and you can text me, is 612, I still keep my Minnesota area code, 612-940-4779. Again, 612-940-4779, John McMunn, and feel free to call me anytime. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, thank you very much, John. That was very entertaining and well worth the time, and a lot of great ideas in there, especially the letter idea. I really like that idea. So
Thank you, Tom.
terrific. Thank you. And I'll try to remain on the balls of my feet the rest of the time, because that's an important advice. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who contributed today, and Gina and John and everyone that attended. We do appreciate you attending. And thank you to Harry Urschel, who is in the back and controlling all the sound and video. I just want to let you know that tomorrow you'll receive a link to many different things that we talked about. Remember that the seminars are recorded, so if you want to go back and retrace some of the things that John talked about, update your notes, those types of things, it would be available on the seminar page of the website, so go check that out. If you're interested, our 8-week courses, we offer them on a monthly basis. They soon will be in person, so if you're interested in the in-person, look for that soon. Remember that in October we will have a full-day seminar at Grace Church, so look for that on the website. Networking every Thursday morning. Get on the website and sign up for that if you're interested in it. Gina talked about it, and the way John talked, he did a lot of effective networking. So networking is the way to find the next career opportunity for you. So check out our networking help, one-on-one help, anything you need from a coaching standpoint, that's all available on the website. Our next job webinar or Crossroads webinar is next Thursday morning, August 19th at 7:30 to 9 with Natalie Ackerman. And Natalie will be talking about interviewing tips and techniques, how to wow interviewers. I've heard it before. It's excellent and it has great content. You don't want to miss it. So tune in with Natalie next Thursday, August 19th at 7:30. I hope this seminar tonight was well worth it and that you got plenty of ammunition for your career search, and I wish you all the best in your search. Have a productive next couple of weeks, and if the results you don't have a job, come join us again at our next webinar. Thank you for joining us tonight at Crossroads Career Network, and have a good evening.